Your monthly subscription box from postflybox.com includes all the materials needed to tie a dozen flies, along with some extra goodies. The mini Marabou Conehead is a very effective trout fly, particularly when fished in off-colored water. It's a pattern that can be both dead drifted and swung across the current and retrieved like a streamer. Begin by inserting the point of one of the hooks into the small hole on one of the cones. You can then get the assembly firmly secured in the jaws of your tying vise. Solder wire is used to add some weight to the fly and to help stabilize the cone on the hook. With the coil in your right hand, get hold of the bitter end in the fingertips of your left. Start taking touching forward wraps up the hook shank with your coil hand. After a dozen or so turns, helicopter the wire to break it off close and clean. Pick up an ample drop of superglue and apply it to the hook shank between the wire wraps and the cone. Quickly slide the wire wraps forward into the back of the cone and hold them there until the adhesive sets. This will allow you to tuck in the tag end without all the wraps simply spinning around the hook shank. For thread, load a bobbin with a spool of black unithread. Get the thread started on the hook shank behind the wire, and after taking a few wraps rearward, snip off the excess tag. Continue taking thread wraps over top of the wire wraps to further lock them in place, then end with your tying thread hanging at about the hook point. Pick up one of the black marabou feathers and strip an inch-long segment free from one side of the lower stem. Do your best to keep the tips aligned. Measure to form a tail about 2 full hooks in length, then use tight wraps of tying thread to anchor the marabou to the hook shank. Once it's locked down, lift the excess butt ends up and snip them off close. Continue taking thread wraps to smooth out the tie-down area, ending, as before, with your thread hanging at about the hook point. To add a little flash to the fly, snip 4 strands of pearl crystal flash free from the hank and locate their midpoint. Place the midpoint against the near side of the hook at the location of your tying thread and take wraps to secure it there. Pull the forward pointing portion of the flash over to the far side of the fly and anchor it there. You should now have flash running down both sides of the tail. If any of the flash is too long, snip it off even with the tips of the marabou. Using the same marabou feather as before, isolate the very tip of the feather by pulling down on the lower fibers, then snip that tip off. While maintaining your grip on the feather, lay the stem and the swept back fibers against the near side of the hook and take thread wraps to secure them. Lift the butt end of the feather up, wet your fingertips, and begin folding the marabou fibers back on either side of the stem. Take forward touching wraps with the feather, preening the fibers back as you go. Keep wrapping until the feather's stem begins to get thick and unmanageable. At this point, take tight wraps of tying thread to anchor the stem to the hook shank, then snip the excess off close. If there's space left between the marabou and the cone, simply pick up another feather and repeat the same tie-in and wrapping procedure until the area is completely filled in. Take a few more thread wraps behind the cone to make sure the marabou is well anchored. Pick up your whip finish tool and use it to do a 5 or 6 turn whip finish, then snip your tying thread free. It's a real good idea to grab your head cement and add an ample drop to the thread wraps behind the cone. This will ensure they don't come unraveled. And that's the mini Marabou Conehead. Underwater, the marabou fibers will be swept rearward by the current, yet continue to move enticingly.